Well, welcome back to the One Big Thing podcast. I'm your host, Steve Campbell. Got a connection of a previous guest today. I have Catherine Sutherland on with me. You can call her Kat. Some of you may know the name, so I don't want to steal some thunder here at the beginning as to, maybe where her roots are from. But I was pleasantly surprised when my friend Laura Osnes referred me to Kat and said, this is an amazing woman that I think you should take the time to let her tell her story and the things she's working on. And so for those that know Kat, welcome to the One Big Things interview style show. So we're going to take some time getting into Kat, and she's going to share today the one big thing that she wants, anybody listening, regardless of where you are in life, to inspire you, to encourage you. So Kat, welcome to the One Big Thing podcast. What's a few things you would want a listener who may not know you to kind of set the groundwork for where we're going today?
Hi, thank you so much for having me. Laura is an amazing person and has been very inspiring in my life. So when she mentioned this podcast to me, I was like, if it's good for you, it's good for me. um, so you were saying the one big thing. I just turned 50 in October, and that is a very transitional time. It's just a number, but it just definitely felt like I'm entering into this next phase of my life. And I just really wanted to do some resetting in some of my habits. I just sent a child off to college, and I'm kind of entering a different chapter in my career. So I just wanted to do some resetting and kind of reclaiming of myself. It's a really interesting thing when you're a mom, because you can really easily lose sense of yourself and what's important to you. And I know a lot of my friends who have older kids had said that to me, but I didn't really get it until I sent my daughter to college and kind of had to adjust to what that will look like as I go into this empty nesting phase, and how can I really reclaim and own who I am as Catherine, not as mom, wife, actress, whatever. Who am I really? So, yeah.
I love that. And I think that's something that I've learned after doing so many episodes of this show. There are things in your future that I think people that have gone ahead of you will want to share. The birth of a child. You'll never understand what it's fully like until you hold a child in your arms. And it's like, yeah, I got it. Like I have a sense of it. And there's just several things that as you grow as an adult that people try to prepare you for. The last high school sporting event, graduating, getting married, your wedding day, having kids. And so I think what you're experiencing now, I can speak from somebody who is in the thick of, 4 kids under the age of 10. And so you can easily look forward to the day when they're out of the home, because it'll be quieter, it'll be cleaner, it'll be easier to do the things my wife Stephanie and I want to do. But if you're not careful, you can rob what I think the Lord is trying to do in this season with us. And so I think this will be a fun conversation today. And you said, turning 50, that's a big watermark. And I know you've accomplished a lot in your life. And so I don't know, again, for anybody who doesn't know you, how much you want to share kind of, 50 years worth of work. And I know you've done, television. We've talked a little bit at the beginning before we came on about now you're a published author. What do people need to know about Kat if they didn't know who you were in the world that might bring them into who you are?
Well, I'm from Australia. I always still say Australia's my home, even though I've lived in America now longer than I was there. I was a very creative child. I don't remember ever not doing something like dancing, acting, singing. I was always involved in the arts. And and then that's obviously what brought me over to America. I was cast as the Pink Power Ranger on Mighty Morphin Power Rangers from 95 to 97. And that just completely turned my world upside down. I moved my whole life alone at 20 years old, and into this whole new culture. And the show was really at its peak when I joined the show. So it was just a huge life shift. And then when the show ended, it was really actually a really scary time for me, because I was committed to Saban Entertainment, who was our who employed me, and I wasn't able to do any other work except for them. So when the show ended, I was really afraid, like, am I going to have to go back to Australia? How am I going to make this work? And they were very kind and helped me get my green card. But acting is a very volatile industry, and I was really welcomed to how difficult it was in Hollywood. I had to do a lot of different things to supplement my income because our show was non-union, so we did not make very much money. So I had to do all kinds of things. I worked for a very high-end catering company. I did. I was a personal trainer. I taught Pilates. I did so many. I worked with children. I did so many different things between jobs, and I think a lot of people don't know that about actors or people in the industry. They just think, oh, you've made it, now everything's perfect, and it's not the case. You really have to. It's a really tough thing, and you do it for the love of it. So I did that for a few years and then decided I just couldn't do it for a while. I just had to back away. And so when I got married, I took a step back from the industry, and my husband and I made the decision for me to raise the kids. I really wanted to be a stay-at-home mom and be as present for my kids as possible. So while my children were little, I did a little modeling and commercial work here and there, a little bit of voiceover work, but I wasn't doing any, like, really pursuing acting at all. I took a big step back. And I'm so grateful that I got to do that, that God allowed us as a family to make that decision, because it's really the most important job, to raise a good human and send them out into the world. And I just really wanted to be able to do that for my kids. So I didn't kind of start getting back into the industry until like maybe my son was maybe 5 or 6. So it was, I took a long break, but I did writing. I was still being creative in a certain sense, but I just really needed to step away from the industry for a while.
Yeah, for a lot of us
So
that grew up as, 90s kids coming home from school, throwing the bag down, what's the first thing you turn on? Power Rangers. And you
yes.
were, second generation, from what I understand, Pink Power Ranger in such an iconic role. And, I'm sure there's so much that I could ask you. And I always try to make sure when people are known for something that they don't spend another podcast episode talking just about that, because I love getting into like, hey, what's the stuff that you don't get to talk about? And I know you and I talked about this hard reset, but I think part of it is when you have fans, when you have viewers, when you have people that look to the fantasy of television and radio, it's an escape for them. And so the Power
Mhm.
Rangers, for so many in their 30s and 40s, were, if school was boring, at least you can come home and watch Tommy the Green Ranger turn into the White Ranger. And that was like the highest tense drama I had when I was like a teenage kid, was like, what happened? And so even for
Yes.
you, it's like, how do you grow past, yeah, you got to play the Pink Ranger, but that's not all you are, right? But to
Yeah.
fans, I know you do a lot with, I don't want to call it Comic-Con, but like
Mhm.
the idea that people still want you to almost like wear the Pink Ranger outfit and yell it's morphin time. And it's like, yeah, but I'm also Cat. So like, even the balance of being a mom, was there a certain age with your kids when you spilled the beans and was like, mom, I mean, my mom was a middle class, she cooked a lot. She did some advertisements in the paper, but my mom never came to me and was like, just so you know, I did play this incredible figure on television. Like, at what age did you bring your kids into what was such a major part of your life?
Yeah, I don't remember like actually having a conversation with them, but I just remember my daughter being in kindergarten and she told some mums that were helping with like Halloween. They were doing like a Halloween project, and she told the mums, "My mummy's the Pink Power Ranger," and they were like, "Oh, she's going to be the Pink Power Ranger for Halloween," and she's like, "No, she's actually the Pink Ranger," and they were like, "Okay, sweetie." So she kind of both my kids, a lot of their friends and everything knew about me being on the show, but it wasn't something I really talked a lot about. Um, it wasn't until like 2009 I was asked to do my first Comic Con, and I didn't even know what that was. I was like, "What is a Comic Con?" And this guy was like, "Well, people come and meet you and you sign things." And I'm like, "What? For what? Like what project?" And they go, "Oh, for Power Rangers." And I go, "That show's still on?" I had no idea. I was so detached from the show at that point. And so I remember going for my first time and just there was so many people there and being so overwhelmed that after all this time, people still even knew who I was. And that was kind of my first indication of like, oh, this show means so much to people. So, you said earlier that, you don't want to, I talk about it a lot. Yes, I do, but I'm very grateful to be a part of the franchise and to be able to bring joy to people. So I'm always happy to talk about it. And, it's something that's kind of come full circle back into my life. I would never have thought after 30 years that I would still be talking about Power Rangers. It just, for whatever, just really impacted people. And it's funny because it's just like a cheesy little kids show, but I hear all the time when I meet fans, they say like, "You were my childhood." That's what I hear. Like it's like it brings people to tears. Like I don't know what it is about it, but it's kind of like Star Wars or Star Trek. There's these certain things that just mean so much to people because it represented something to them in their childhood.
Yeah,
So
and I think the premise of Power Rangers, right? If you're in school watching a show where it's based on, teenagers or high school kids, and then they also happen to fight with these powers, you're able to escape, the fact
mm,
that if you were bullied as a kid, at
yeah,
least you could watch a television and show and feel like when the music came on and you guys morphed and became things, it was like it's sci-fi in a way that allows you to transcend kind of your moment, and it's crazy that that like sticks with you for that long. And even
yeah,
now, with my 4 kids, it's like, trying to show them shows I grew up with, and it's changed so much with cinematography and Netflix and shows that my kids watch, and they're so spoiled with streaming today, where as a kid you waited for those afternoon shows to come on. I was a
yes,
big Power Rangers slash Saved by the Bell guy. And
yes.
even now I'm seeing Mark Paul Gosselaar talk about he didn't enjoy playing Zach Morris. And I'm like, Zach Morris was
Wow.
an iconic figure in my life. What do you mean by this? Is
Yes.
like, I don't know if I can handle all of this right now in my, late 30s. But with you, I was kind of hoping you were going to say like your one of your kids stumbled upon your closet and just found the Pink Ranger. And I was like, what's going on here? Like,
No,
your dad.
nothing that exciting.
Did
Nothing that
you
exciting.
did you get into within acting? Like, was there ever like an action figure of you? Was that super
Oh,
weird?
tons.
Like,
There's
is
tons.
that crazy coming from Australia, coming to the States, getting into acting, and then you're walking around Toys R Us or a store and seeing yourself in an action figure? Like, do they like, what is it even like to know that you're going to have an action figure made from you? Do they
Well,
take the measurements? Because sometimes they don't look
they
exactly like
do. Oh,
you.
they don't look anything like us. But no, the toys were a huge part of the show. Obviously, I feel like we were like a commercial for the toys. Really, they did measure our face and measure. It was very like we went through photos and different angles of our face. And then I saw my toy and I was like, that is Tommy with pasty white skin and white hair.
Mm.
They
Yeah.
used the same model, it felt like, for all of us. And they were like big, bulky, like they did not look feminine at all. But still, it's so cool to be a toy. Like, that's really cool. Seeing your kids playing with you, it's kind of crazy. But now, all these years later, Hasbro now owns Power Rangers, so they have made these beautiful lightning figures, and there's a lot of toy makers like Super Seven and what's that other one? 30. They make collectible toys. So now they're like beautiful. They look like us. They're beautifully made, and collectors, come and have us sign them all the time. And so I get to see like really like ones that look much more like me. So
And in your world, right, you have fans that appreciate you even after all these years. Do you ever find yourself, as you connect with fans, trying to also help them to connect with Kat, right? Because they're clearly connecting with the Pink Ranger, and that's who you portrayed. But you just said that you've also been working on resetting and not reinventing, but resetting, and you've done personal fitness and catering. Is there ever time at these Comic Cons or as you meet with people where you can speak life to them beyond being a character to them, but like you're a real person? And what is the depth of those relationships when you can take somebody, I'm not saying from being a fan to being a friend, but you're no longer necessarily this role. You're just somebody giving back who got an opportunity to play a role. So what is that like connecting with people and trying to build more meaningful connections with the things that you're working on today?
That's a really great question. Thank you. I actually look for opportunities all the time. I always pray before I go to a convention to be used by God, that He would use me to bring light to people, that I will have a conversation that He wants me to have. I'm always looking for opportunities like that. So I feel like it goes very much beyond Power Rangers for me, because I feel like I have meaningful conversations all the time. I've had people tell me that, prayed over people that are dying of cancer. And I've had, parents bringing their child that's, severely disabled, and been able to speak into that family. I feel like every time I'm at a convention, there's another person that brings me to tears, or that I'm able to to speak into. I feel like that's what it's all about. Like, acting's fun, but it's really about the impact you're making on people.
And
That's
I think
what matters.
you just nailed it. That as you grow, as you experience life, and then you experience life through the eyes of being a mom or dad, and there's a sweetness, I think, with the Lord that He takes us all on, that He allows us to experience what we assume we want. Many times God will give you those things, that
Mm-hmm.
and there's an emptiness or a lack of fulfillment, that you got to play one of the most iconic characters in television history, and yet that praying with a child, or praying over someone with cancer, has much more significant meaning. And so, whether you are an actor, an actress, and singing, or you're a nurse or a teacher, it's about making an impact. And I think that the sooner in my life that I can understand that, and what is this platform for, why am I interacting with these people, I think the balance is trying, at least in my life, never to run ahead of the Lord and just manufacture God
Mm-hmm.
things, but just being patient and obedient. And there's been random times in my life in coffee shops and in different things where I just have this sense of like, go pay for that coffee, go talk to that person.
Mm-hmm.
And the next thing you know, you have a meaningful connection. So I don't want to steal the thunder from what you started to get into at the beginning, that you talked about at 50 resetting. Now that we know, obviously, your background and what you're going through, um, how did we get to where we are today? What are some of the things that you're working on? You told me kind of right before we came on, and I think it's super powerful and could help a lot of people. So why don't you start
Mm-hmm.
to walk us through kind of your assessment of what needed to be reset in your life?
Well, the first thing I mean, when my daughter left to go to college, I felt really overwhelmed by um, just there was this empty space in
Mhm.
my house, and I was like avoiding walking past her room and all this stuff. And I'm like, what is going on with me? And I was like a little bit of an existential crisis going on. Like, I was like, okay, I'm a mom, and that's very important, and I've done a good job, and I've sent her off into the world. But why am I feeling so? Like, I felt confused about who am I, and where am I going, and what's the next steps of my life, and does what I'm doing matter, and what's my purpose, and all these kind of questions kept coming up in my mind. And I was having like, I would wake up at like 3 in the morning, and that seems to be when God talks to me the most, actually. But I would wake up with like a lot of fear and a lot of anxiety, which is not something I usually struggle with. I was like, just these racing thoughts of like all these fears, and I'm like, what is going on with me? So I thought maybe it was hormonal, to be honest with you. I was like, maybe I'm going through some kind of hormonal shift. And I started reading about, menopause, and it was saying, you have sometimes women, that happens to women. Their sleep is interrupted or whatever. I'm like, okay, well, maybe it's that. So I went to my doctor, and we did all this blood tests, and my doctor was like, no, your hormones are actually really good. Like, you're doing good. Like, but maybe we need to like look at some other things that are going on. I have Hashimoto's disease, which is a thyroid condition. So there's some things that happen in my body that I have to be checked constantly to make sure everything's running smoothly. So we did that, and there wasn't really anything coming up that was concerning. So at the same time, my pastor was talking about doing, every year he does, leading into Easter, we do a digital detox. And so I had done it last year and felt like it was really good. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to take it to a different level this year. I'm really going to dive in. This is the book. He's Digital Fast by Darren Whitehead. He's an Aussie like me. So he has had a workbook that went along with it. And I was like, okay, obviously I still need to be on social media to a certain degree, but I really want to put the phone back in its place. Like, technology is a wonderful tool, but it's not something that should dictate your life and rob you of your peace and being healthy and being able to connect with people and be present with people. So I started doing this workbook. It was a 30-day detox, but it really allowed me to see a lot of things and my behavior and a lot of my dependence on my phone that were really unhealthy habits. Like, for example, I don't think I'm alone in this, but I would wake up in the morning and get my coffee, and the first thing I would do was pick up my phone and look at my messages and look at my emails, and it like puts you into an immediate state of stress because you're like, my day has been beginning, and like it's just not a good way for your body to wake up.
Yeah.
And you're having caffeine, and it's like everything's very overstimulating. And so the first thing I did was I was like, okay, I'm going to start the first 2 hours of my day for God. I am not going on my phone. I'm not going to look at my messages. I'm not going to look at the weather. I'm not going to look at emails. I am going to spend time with the Lord because that is what brings me peace.
Yep.
So I started doing that every morning. I would do my Bible study. And I was also noticing in my prayer life a lot of like pouring out to God, like complaining or asking for things. I'm like, what would it look like if I just sat and didn't speak and just sat in God's presence? And so I started doing that. And I just noticed some things in my behavior, like I would be praying, but I would be distracted by my phone. I'd want to go and pick up my phone. And it took about, I would say, like 12 days for me to stop feeling that distraction of like recognizing that it was there and not wanting to pick it up. So that was the first thing I did. And then as it went on, I was like, okay, maybe now I'm not going to take my phone when I walk my dog. So I'm going to look around me and look at the trees and the flowers and like listen to the sounds around me. And then from that, I was like, I'm not going to check my emails on my phone. I'm going to check my emails on my computer. So I stopped looking at my phone for emails. So it was just like kind of a gradual peeling back and recognizing how dependent I had become on my phone. I think we all struggle with that. So social media as well. I was like, I'm going to schedule my posts for, I obviously, if I'm going to a convention or, my friend Nikki and I have a YouTube channel, there's things that I do have to be on social media for, but what if I just did that all on one day? So I schedule everything and I'm not having to go on and get sucked into the vortex and start doom scrolling and then get stressed out because I'm just overloaded with so much information. So that really helped me as well. So I just feel like I started to sleep better. I started to notice that I didn't have anxiety. I was much more present and listening when my people would talk to me. I was actually like engaged and listening to what they had to say instead of being distracted by a text and a notification on your phone. And to stop picking up my phone and looking at it for nothing. Like, what are we looking for? So I was like, it just really was very eye-opening in my own behavior. And it's just like when you buy a new car and you see that car everywhere, I started to see everywhere how many people are attached to their phone. And as soon as we sit down and we don't have something to do, we don't know how to be bored. We don't know how to just sit anymore. We feel like we constantly have to be stimulated. And instant gratification has become such a problem for us because we don't know how to just wait for things. Like you were saying, you had to wait for that episode of Power Rangers. Everything is just instant. You can have everything right away, and it's not healthy. And we're not meant to know this much information. I'm a really sensitive person. I don't need to know everything. Like I was feeling so overwhelmed at times about what do I pray for? Because there's so much
Yep.
in going on. back before we had the internet, you knew about your community and maybe some world news, but it wasn't this inundation of opinions everywhere around you. And it's very overwhelming and it's very destructive. And I think it's become a huge problem in our world that we've now got so much opinion that we don't know how to filter it out anymore. And we don't know what our opinion is because we're constantly being told everything. So just putting my phone back in its place was very helpful for my own peace and my own sanity. Um, and so now I'm hoping that I can continue those habits and I don't fall back into bad habits again. So
Well,
that was the first thing.
no, that's super helpful, and I think that's a challenge for so many of us. Um,
Yeah.
the phones become a crutch, and with my young kids, it's like, guys, you got to learn to be bored as I'm like on
Yeah.
my phone scrolling, and it's like a double standard. And I think
Mm-hmm.
it's challenging today because even the other day I was trying to find some good news stories to share, and it was just they were hard to find. I
Yeah.
mean, I did multiple different searches in Facebook for positive news, and every story was just death, destruction, murder,
Mm-hmm.
violence, like one after
Yeah.
another. And I was like, okay, it's a little heavy. And you go on and you want to be an informed citizen. You want to know how to be an
Mm-hmm.
informed person so you can be, aware of what is happening. But like you said, it is too much sometimes that we just I think what happens then is that the gratification spills over into other parts of our life where we want, because social media is instant and streaming is instant, we want marriage to be instant. We want our children to
Mm-hmm.
behave instantly. We want our career to take off. We want to make money instantly. And then when those things don't happen, if we're not careful, then the voice of the enemy becomes so loud in your head of you're a failure or you're lost or you're anxious. And so you feel like in a way your phone becomes this drug that you're addicted to that no one wants to admit and you don't even realize it. But like you said, if the first thing that you do, that I do, and I'm guilty of this, is when I don't know what to do, I pick up that small technical instrument in my hand and scroll other people's stories, other people's life, what is happening, then I can't be giving my wife my full attention. I can't be
Yeah.
listening to my kids. And it's hard. I mean, when your kids are young, they're formulating language, they're telling you stories, and you're not truthfully always interested in what they're saying. And it's just so easy to, as they're talking, just stare at your phone and be like, yep, mm-hmm, yep, mm-hmm. And it's
Mm-hmm.
so important to them. And, I have a very sensitive spirit that um, a lot of people can tell me what I'm doing wrong, but 80% of the time I already know it. And it's just, what do I do with that? So I love the digital detox because I think it's even hard. I've even made TikTok videos and stuff kind of saying the same thing, like, guys, we got to get off our phones. And it's like, where are people watching that on their phone? So it's kind of like, this is ridiculous. And I'm
No,
making a
and
video.
it's not all bad. Like there's some beautiful things that have come out of phones and technology. Like TikTok can be really fun, and I just think it's putting it in its place. Like for example, if I want to look at a cute dog video, whatever, you get the algorithm then locks you in and then you get sucked in. And the problem is, I'm reading a book called Dopamine Nation, and she talks a lot about this, is that you feed the addiction and you never reach that first time that you saw that thing or you tasted that thing or you felt that thing. It's like I think it's called chasing the dragon or something. You're constantly chasing that feeling but you never reach it. And that's how these phones are designed. It's almost like a poker machine where you're like pulling the thing and you
Yep.
think you're going to win, you think you're going to, and it keeps people gambling because they think they're going to get that $1,000 again, and they never get it. So, but it's that's what the phone, like, it's even designed to scroll, like you're scrolling, and it's this dopamine. Like our brains are now not producing the dopamine hit anymore because we're so overloaded all the time with dopamine because we just want everything instantly. And it's something beautiful about waiting for something. Like my mom and dad used to, at Christmas time, they do layaway, and I had to wait for that bike or wait for that pair of shoes or whatever, that thing that I really wanted, and we'd make payments on it. It was exciting. We don't do that anymore because we have credit card debt and people are, getting over their heads because they want to buy that bike and they can't afford it, you know. So
Well, and
it's such a shame.
I think it's challenging too because you live in a world where you are the main consumer and driver of what you want to see. And when I used to indulge in 90s television, you had to watch commercial breaks. You couldn't skip.
Hmm.
And so you'd watch 8 minutes of a show and then 3 minutes of commercials and then 8 minutes on a show. And those commercial breaks is where you went and you unplugged for a second, you ran to the bathroom, you grabbed a snack.
Yes.
And now it's just
Yes.
like you're watching a YouTube video, you're watching this podcast, and an ad pops up. If you wait 5 seconds, you hit skip and you're right back to the material. When you're on your phone watching a reel, you turn a reel on. If you don't like it, you swipe, you swipe. Now you like this one. And now the internet is figuring out Catherine likes to watch these type of videos. But
Hmm.
you don't realize what you're doing is saying, don't show me this, show me that. And what that's doing to your brain and how that flows over then into why are my wife and I not connecting? And it's because on Facebook, I can reject what I don't like. When I sit with my wife and she says, Steve, when you say this to me, this hurts me. And I now can't just swipe that away and go, don't show me that. It's, I have to deal with the
Hmm.
reality of I'm letting you down or at work, I'm letting you down. And so technology does have a blessing that when you're lost, you ask Siri, how do I get home? And it shows you how to get
Hmm.
home. But the
Yep.
loss that you can also be is being sucked into something. And so you've talked a little bit about, the social detox. You've talked a little bit about dopamine, in the time that we, have left here, the 10ish minutes or so. Is there anything else that you would say this is really important that I want anybody listening to make sure that they're paying attention to?
I just really think it's important to connect, to take the moments to connect with each other,
Mhm.
and that there's such power in that of actually listening, actively listening to somebody, and not um, like when you're with people, be with them.
Yeah.
That's like, be present with them. That's It's so valuable and it's so important. And we've gotten so, I mean, I was even thinking the other day about how it's so easy to leave a voice text for somebody. Now we have audio text where you can leave an 8-minute message for somebody and never have to talk to them. And it's sad. Like, why are we not picking up the phone and talking to each other anymore? Or like being spontaneous and saying, hey, can I stop over and have a cup of coffee and let's chat? Like, there's a lot less of that happening because people are so, like you were just saying, it's so easy to swipe away something and push it away and have this pretend life, you know? So it's been very, in my own life, I think really convicting for me to see how I was totally victim praying. Like, I had an addiction to my phone. If I'm really honest, I think it's just very easy to do that. And then I also I decided to do a water fast just because I really wanted to like carry on this detox system, going through like spiritual, mind, body, spiritual. Um, so I'm on my, I've been, how long has it been? 50 hours now without food.
That's
Yeah.
and to help
Yeah.
people really understand, I'm a big believer in intermittent fasting. And I think I had implemented fasting for the health benefits. And it wasn't until recently
Mm.
that I really started praying and saying, I also want it to be a spiritual fast. And so, I think I've gone as long as 48, pretty close to 50. I have a friend that just completed 120
Mm.
hours. Like, that's a lot. And so why don't
That's a
you,
lot.
just for nobody, for somebody who's never heard about fasting, like, what are we talking
Hmm.
about? Why don't you talk to us about like why fasting,
Hmm.
maybe some of the pros, the cons, and then if you have somebody say, okay, I'll give this a shot, how do you work through some of the initial bumps and hurdles of just hunger and giving up? For somebody who says, I've tried that, I couldn't do it. What has
Yeah.
fasting, done for you, and why would you encourage somebody who's never considered it to give it a try?
Yeah, I've done a like a 3-day juice fast before,
Mhm.
but I've never done a water fast. So with a water fast, it always really scared me. So it's really important when you enter into it that your mind is prepared, that you make sure that you are not overscheduled, or it's very important to make sure that your life is going to be able to handle the demands of it. Because if you go into it with any kind of anxiety, then you should stop, because that defeats the whole purpose.
Sure.
So my doctor and I talked about it. She does it a couple of times a year, and she says 3 days is like the golden number. So the purpose is it helps with insulin resistance.
Mhm.
So, we eat way too many carbohydrates and processed foods, and our bodies overproduce insulin, and it causes a lot of metabolic issues. So that's the first one. It helps with clarity in your brain.
Yep.
It creates autophagy, which is a process of cellular regeneration. So a lot of doctors are actually using it with cancer patients now and seeing huge benefits, because the bad cells are eaten up by the good cells. Your body just kind of has this whole reset and turnover. And it has to be 3 days to get to that, because your body has to get into ketosis, which
Mhm.
is where it starts to burn fat
Yep.
and use fat in the right way. So she was kind of saying to me, it's almost like a resetting of the metabolic function and the gut. So your gut is like your second brain, and it helps your gut rest, because we're always chewing and eating and producing acids to break foods down, and it like gives your system a break. And I was thinking, like, in the Bible, fasting was very much a part of their life. Like,
Yep.
they did this all the time. um, and I think we're designed to be a little bit uncomfortable, but we live in a culture now that's all about comfort. Everything's instant. So I really loved the idea of kind of making my body work a little harder, and getting a little bit uncomfortable. I personally haven't felt hungry, because I have a powder that is full of minerals, like a electrolyte powder that I add to the water. It's no calories or anything, but I feel like it really helps my cells absorb the hydration. So I think when you start to feel hungry, that's a lot of the time is because you're dehydrated.
Mhm.
So that, and then I have herbal tea, and it hasn't been as hard as I thought it was going to be. So I've been making sure that I'm not overdoing it with, obviously with exercise. I'm doing, Pilates or yoga, or things that are just a little bit calmer for my system. But I thought I would feel really lethargic, and I don't. I feel really
Really well.
clear.
Yep. That's
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
something for me that it's funny you're talking about this, because I started about 3.5 weeks ago really trying to implement intermittent fasting, because I got to a point where the stress of being a dad, food became the crutch, and
Mm.
an overconsumption of food and technology, two things we nailed today. Great.
Hmm.
Love it.
You
Uh,
needed to hear it, obviously.
but my kids stress me out, I turn to food. My kids stress me out, I'm on my phone. And those aren't healthy habits. And if you're somebody who's on screen and doing media, you want to look your best. And I've done yo-yo dieting. I've gotten to a place. I've always been able, because I was a college athlete, to get my body to turn the direction I wanted to. The hardest part was consistency. And so it's funny you
Mm,
bring this up today, because a couple of weeks ago, I just basically committed it to the Lord and was like, kind of enough's enough. Like I got to get going, and I got to get going in a way that's not like I did okay for a few days and I'm good. And so I have been implementing on Sundays a full 24-hour fast. A little bit different for me. I do water, and the only other thing I do is black coffee. There's no
mhm.
calories in that, but I'll do the full
Yes.
24 hours. And then when I wake up Monday morning, I've added an additional 6 hours. So now I'm at 30. And what I do then throughout the week is I'll do intermittent fasting in an 18-6 window. So, I'll eat, from noon to 6, and then I don't eat again until the next day at noon. And I still train, I
Mm,
still lift weights, because I was at the gym all the time, 4 days a week, and had the belly and the gut and all this stuff, not in a bad way, but I was still training. And so there was an aspect of my life that was still somewhat in shape, but because of the food I was eating, I was never making gains or improvement. And I just one day was like, what am I doing? I have the discipline to get to the gym, I just don't have the disciplines in these other areas when it comes to what I would call addiction to my phone and to food. And so fasting,
mhm.
I've now talked to people in the hallway about fasting where I work. I've talked to my buddies about fasting. We're all doing it together. And it's not about weight, but I've dropped 12 pounds, and I feel
That's
better, and I feel
amazing.
more in
It's
control. And
probably a lot of inflammation
a lot of
too.
inflammation, but just focus, you know?
Mm,
And I think for me, it was, yeah, intermittent fasting, the health benefits, the apotrophy, the stuff you talked about, but just like, Jesus, I want you to have full access to me. And
mhm.
I don't want anything else, food, to get me. And that's what I was thinking about
Distract you.
earlier when you were talking about, I can have my Bible in front of me and that phone laying face down, and I'm praying and I hear the vibration, and you tell yourself, I'm just going to look, just want to make sure nothing's wrong. And then that look turns into, oh, funny, what's the weather today? And then you're on your weather, and then you're like, God, I never hear from you. And I think some of the
Yes.
stuff of what you're talking about today is, this is the reality of life. There's a maturation process where you want to make an impact. But if you are not developing the daily habits and disciplines, and they all three things you just said work together, what I have noticed is that many times I'll start in one direction. And because I start to gain governance in that area of my life, the other ones start to fall into place. And so it's not one pulls the other. But when you begin to fast, you begin to then become more aware of, like, because I have more clarity now, because I'm not allowing food to take my life. Wow, I'm on my phone a lot. And then the next thing you know, you're putting
Yes.
your phone down. And then the next thing you know, you're like, you know what? I could probably be making my bed every day. And then you start making your bed every day. And all of a
Yes.
sudden,
You're
it's
more
like,
productive. You're
I
more
brushed my teeth
productive.
today. I probably need to brush my teeth again. It's like, when you remove all of the swiping and all of the images and all of the sound
Mhm.
constant, and then kids coming into your life and waking you up at night, it's very easy to feel like you're stuck in a rut. And so I think what I want to do is we bring this home, make sure that we have contact information for you. But I think what's so cool about your stories, you were somebody who's in the limelight for many years for people, still iconic to people that come to Comic-Con. But at the end of the day, your cat trying to figure it out as a mom, now as an empty nester. Lord, what do you have next? And I think it's very cool to hear that you are somebody who's acknowledged, I was addicted to my phone. Because I think to that person who's listening to you, it's like, Kat, you seem so cool, but you don't know. It may not be addicted to cocaine or alcohol, but it's like, oh, wow, she's addicted to her phone. Makes me feel a little bit better. She was eating the wrong foods. Okay, that's kind of cool to know too.
Mhm.
And it gives people space to join in with you. So, we've
Yeah.
spent about 40 minutes here together. We've talked about resetting. Is there anything though in the last minute or two that you want to leave with people? And obviously we'll put information in the show notes.
Yeah, I just think if I could just say, like, if you just taking small steps,
Mhm.
like, don't overwhelm yourself with, like, this has been a journey over the past year for me. So don't, like, try to do everything at once, but just make, like, one step. Like, I'm not going to have my phone next to me
Mhm.
when I sleep. Just this, that. You will see a difference. I promise you. It's quite amazing. And the other thing I would say is that you don't have to feel this pressure to respond to every impulse that you have or every text that you have. It's okay to take a minute and wait. I was noticing that I was so eager, my people pleasing tendencies. I was like, I had to respond to people right away because it's rude, or I have to respond to every DM that comes in, and I get thousands of messages, and I would try to respond to it. It was so much pressure, and I couldn't do it, and then I would feel bad because I couldn't do it. It's okay to wait and to pause. And
Mhm.
there's so much power in that pause if you just wait and just give it a minute before you respond or look at something or whatever, eat that cookie, whatever it is. Really think, being intentional and thinking about what you're putting in your body and your mind. And I think with the fasting, it's like makes you very aware of, like, what you're filling yourself with. I want to fill myself with things that bring me peace. I want to, so I can pour that out back out to others. So yeah,
And that's really good, because for me, I think sometimes I feel like, am I broken? In the sense that, when you are struggling with an addiction to food or to something, it's crazy how when you're in your car, this voice becomes very loud. Stop at the
mhm,
gas station and get something you shouldn't have. Go buy that coffee. Go indulge in the thing. And it's like,
the pleasures of the
Jesus, that
world.
that's not you.
Hmm.
Like, you want me to go touch people's lives. You're not, when my kids go to bed, telling me like, hey, what's in the pantry? And I think it's, for me, it's been learning to recognize, what is that voice and where is it coming from? And if I
Hmm.
will replace that response to something else completely, yeah, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go over here. Like, put an action to the other thing, because if you don't, that becomes, it's like, don't know if you ever grew up. Sorry, and I said we were closing, but I was just thinking
No,
of
it's
Lord
fine.
of the Rings, Smeagol, right? And that ring. It's like life as
Mm,
an adult becomes this ring where it's like everything is like, my precious. It's like
yes.
calling to you all the time. And you're like, what do you mean, Steve? I'm not addicted. It's like, do you pick up your phone all the time? You may be addicted. Is food the crutch
Well,
when you're kids? Like it
the,
may be addicted in the sense of like, it's kind of what you crave.
the enemy is called the Prince of Lies for a reason. And his whole purpose is to distract you, to pull you away from Jesus or from the Lord. He wants to get you as distracted as possible because then you're not going to be productive. You're not going to be used by God. And when you really think about it that way, it makes me want to rebel against that and not, you know, be at the whim of every single pleasure that the world presents me with. It's I think I know God wants us to have a full and wonderful life, but I don't want to be at the mercy of every human pleasure that I have that's not healthy for me. We have one body, you get one body for 80 years, 100 years, however long you live. And what are you going to do to take care of that body? In every way, like to be the best human you can be and be the most effective for the Lord that you can be.
Well, here's my I hope this thing comes full circle. I hope by the time this episode airs, you're at a future Comic-Con and you have somebody who came to see the Pink Ranger, but now comes to see Cat and says, "Hey, I heard you on that one guy's show, and I've been implementing a digital detox, and you helped change my life." That's the point
Oh,
of the
I
show,
hope so.
right? You are
Yes,
more than a
praise God.
mask. You are more than a Pink Ranger. You are Cat Sutherland, somebody who is trying to figure life out, just like we all are, to show up and be the best mom you can be, the best human. And my hope is that through this episode, we'll put contact information in the show notes that people can implement one, two, three, four of the ideas that we talked about today, but small steps to point you in the right direction. So, Kat Sutherland, thank you for being a
Yes,
guest on the One Big Thing podcast. And to
thank
family and
you.
friends, just a little call. I'd love for you to check out Lauren Osnes, other guests that have been on the show. We have had an incredible run here over the last few years of having guests from all walks of life. And if there are people that you want to hear from, get in touch with me. I'd love to interview them like Kat, help tell their story, bring things to light that they're working on. And we'll also put information in the show notes too for your kids' book because I want to make sure that
Oh,
people can check
yes,
that. So, thanks for being
absolutely.
my guest on the show. Appreciated the time.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.